Now that Cody Bellinger is signed, does that mean that the Cubs are done in free agency? We're going to talk about that. With Cody Bellinger on the Cubs, does that mean Pete Crow-Armstrong is destined to start the season in Iowa, or Michael Busch in Iowa? We're going to get into that as well. And are the Cubs done in the free agent game now that they've signed Cody Bellinger? All those topics right here on the Cubs Baseball channel. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. Get in the comments section and comment away. Let's talk about what you guys think as well. Thanks for hanging out with us. Like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up, as I mentioned before. Let's get this thing started. Here is your invitation to the Cubs Baseball channel. What do you say, everybody? Welcome to the Cubs Baseball channel. I'm Mick Gillispie at Broadcaster Mick, and it is a pleasure to talk to you guys again today. Now, I want to thank everyone who jumped on with us yesterday when we woke up to the news that Cody Bellinger was a Cub, and I was really excited about it. And I got to tell you, I am a hard sleeper, so once I went to bed, I didn't wake up until 7, and as soon as I did, I was like, oh my goodness, look at this. Came out here, and we got together to talk about the news. So we did that for over an hour yesterday and kind of broke it down, but we got a little bit more time today. And I wanted to talk about what it means to have Cody Bellinger. What does it mean for the market? What does it mean for the remaining free agents? Are the Cubs done? You're talking about $30 million, $30 million, $20 million in a 3-year deal. Now, I've heard it described, and I think it's a very good description, as his contract is a Carlos Correa type of deal. Remember, he signed one that was 3 years, $105 million, and he's got opt-out. Same thing with Bellinger. He's got opt-out. So it's not a one-year deal, but in essence, it could be a one-year deal if he feels like he could opt out and get the extended contract that he was seeking next year that he didn't get this year, right? But you still have $80 million. So no matter what, you're in good shape if you're him at 80, 30 this year. All right. Signing Cody Bellinger, and this was something that I talked about yesterday, and then I was watching the guys on Marquee, Boog Shambi and Jim DeShays, and they were talking about what does this mean for the roster? And they said, well, I guess that means that Pete Crow-Armstrong, Hollywood Pete, starts in AAA Iowa, and that Bellinger would be your center fielder. Well, I didn't even think about that as a possibility. I figured you would keep Pete Crow-Armstrong and that you would have him in the big leagues, and Bellinger would go from center field to first base to DH. And I think that eventually will be what happens. But then listening to those guys, I'm thinking, well, maybe he does end up starting the season in AAA Iowa. Maybe he goes there and works on his swing and tries to improve on the things that he didn't do. He wasn't in AAA a whole lot last year. So I even though I never thought of that, I got to give those guys credit. I mean, that's a distinct possibility. And then you keep Mike Tauchman. And then I'm guessing that Pete Crow-Armstrong would eventually come back to the big leagues, right? Well, I mean, I guess that'd be the game plan, but I don't think that's set in stone, though. I think if Pete Crow-Armstrong really proves himself in camp, he could make that decision tough on the Cubs. And part of that could be, what if Michael Busch doesn't perform and they feel like he's got to go back to AAA? He's dominated in AAA, but that was with the Dodgers. So I think there's still some question marks here. And if you're trying to win, I know young players are sometimes a bigger question mark than proven veterans, but Joe Maddon always seemed to get the best out of the young players, and he seemed to know when it was important to have those guys on the big league roster. So I'm not buying totally in to Michael Busch and Pete Crow-Armstrong not being on the major league roster, but I never thought, and I guess maybe I should have, that signing Bellinger meant that you didn't get Hollywood Pete as well. But a distinct possibility. Now, what does signing Cody Bellinger mean to the market, the actual market with free agents, and particularly free agents that have been waiting out the market like he did? Was the Boris 5 to me. Some people said the Boris 4, but the Boris 5. And now all of a sudden it's the Boris 4 because he signed with the Cubs. And I don't know if that's a unique situation because Bellinger may have said, "Hey, I'm not waiting anymore. Let's just get a deal done and we'll figure this out again next year." And this is definitely a very team-friendly contract for the Cubs, way less than what the perceived market was going to be for Cody Bellinger of $200 million. They got him for $80 million with opt-outs. Better than not, he'll opt out of this contract at some point. Maybe after the first year, maybe after the second year, and then, you don't have him anymore. Maybe he sticks it through. We'll find out. But with the signing, here's a look at where the Cubs are payroll-wise, right? Tom Ricketts has said, hey, we're going to be right around the MLB tax threshold, and they're pretty close to that now. So you're looking at $231+ million, and you are allowed to spend $237 million without being penalized. You go over that, and then all of a sudden you start paying back into Major League Baseball, which is, I guess, supposed to go to teams that don't have as many resources as the big market teams, right? I don't see the Cubs going over that. So would that keep them from making other deals? One could be Matt Chapman. Christopher Morel, great catch, great diving catch in the game against the Padres. I've tried to keep close attention to Christopher Morel at third base. I hope that this is still going on when I get to Arizona, just so that I can watch him play third without TV cameras, where I can just watch what he's doing with his feet, where his body is, what the throws look like. A lot of stuff that you can't pick up off of a television broadcast that you really need to be there in person to see. So I'll be there in a couple weeks, and we'll see what's going on at that point. Now, could the Cubs sign Matt Chapman or Jordan Montgomery, who I'm going to talk about in a second? Would they like to have it? Well, Matt Chapman would definitely be a more solid third baseman with no question marks. I mean, you know what you're getting. Gold Glove, the bat's there, some not there sometimes, but consistently can hit. Great option. When the Cardinals have Nolan Arenado, gives you a guy that's going to be competing with him for a Gold Glove. Great defense. I mean, think about the infield if you had him in there with the guys that the Cubs have right now. Dansby Swanson, Nico Horner, and maybe Cody Bellinger, maybe Michael Busch at first base, maybe Matt Mervis. So I think a long shot at this point. The Mervis is like the horse in the Kentucky Derby that has like the 1 to 25 odds to win the race. I mean, he's back there. He still has a chance. Those guys sometimes get there, but it'd be long odds, right? Well, if the Cubs are going to make a deal like this, they would have to be creative with it, because I don't know a contract scenario where Chapman's going to take, like $3 million. I just don't see that. I think he's going to make way north of that much money, right? And would he do the Dodgers deal? And would the Cubs even want to do that, where they defer money? And then if you did that, wouldn't that be something that you would do on a contract that was more than 1 year? And are you going to sign Chapman for more than 1 year? So I feel like the Bellinger signing has pretty much eliminated the Cubs from Chapman, unless somehow they signed him and then maybe they traded someone else away to free up payroll. And I don't know if that's a possibility or not, but they would have to be very creative. The other guy that we talked about yesterday, and it changes a lot. Sometimes we do these shows the night before, right? I mean, we air them at 5 a.m. Central Time, right? So I'm not normally up at 5 a.m. Central Time, so we get together, we do them, sometimes Catfish, sometimes me. I'll have other guests on throughout the season. And you try to figure out where the market is at that particular time. Well, last night, John Heyman, we talked about, said, hey, the Cubs are still interested. There's still a player for Jordan Montgomery. I wonder how that changes if you're the Cubs now that you signed Bellinger. Now, the reason why I feel like this one could be more realistic is that if you sign Jordan Montgomery, I'm guessing that you're going to sign him to a multi-year deal. I mean, you're talking about a pitcher who was tremendous in the playoffs last year, the 3-1 record, the 2.90 ERA, helped the Rangers win the World Series. You know him from the Cardinals. You know him from the Yankees. And it just looked like he finally put it all together for the first time. Maybe you do a deal with him where it's deferred money this year and then it builds, because I'm guessing he's going to get at least a 3-year deal and maybe more. And I'm guessing that he's going to be in the tune of $100 million. So, how would that work out? And do the Cubs feel like they need a Jordan Montgomery? That's the other question. I mean, they've got Imanaga, they've got Steele, they've got Wicks. So we'll find out. These are all very interesting, questions as far as how this is all going to work with this team this year. Now, the other thing is, don't be surprised if the Cubs don't use some sort of soft 6-man rotation like the Yankees did last year, the Mets did last year, the other team in New York, when they were working in Senga into the rotation. Hey, when you come from Japan, it's a 6-man rotation. So you use days off, and then, maybe you use a Assad, maybe you use a Wicks, maybe you use a Smiley to help bridge that gap so that you're easing in Imanaga because you don't want to injure him, getting him out of his routine of pitching every 6 days. That's a risk that the Dodgers are taking with Yamamoto, and it's one that the Cubs are taking with Imanaga. But at the same time, worth risk if those guys come out and perform the way that we think they can, right? Guy to watch, was tuned in to the game, and here comes Cam Sanders. Of course, his dad, Scott, pitched for the Cubs in the big leagues, also for the Padres, former, I think a first-round pick for the Cubs out of LSU. Guy can throw. I probably should check that, just because if I'm wrong on Sanders, everybody's going to say, hey, you said he was a first-round pick. I know he was a high draft pick. But anyway, talking about Sanders, 27 years old now, great stuff. If the Cubs are able to get him, or he's able to get himself, not to throw as many balls, to throw strikes. All right, I was way off. 12th round pick in 2018 out of LSU. I'm glad I checked that. Anyway, if they're able to get the strikes to fall in the zone, he's got the kind of stuff that could be very helpful for the Cubs in the bullpen. He's got starter stuff, but it's always been throwing the ball over the plate consistently that's held him back. But he looked good today, and I feel like eventually that light's going to come on, and so hopefully that continues. But he's someone that I would keep an eye on, kind of for one of those bullpen spots. Talked about Hunter Biggie, and talk about Cam Sanders today as another guy who could come out of nowhere and be a real asset for the Cubs moving forward. All right, guys, that's all I got today. If something breaks, that we'll jump on there and talk about it. Again, love hanging out with you guys in the comments section. Make sure that you like and subscribe, share as well. We'll talk Cubs baseball. Want to remind you that our channel is presented by the Smokies and their team store, smokiesbaseball.com/store. Cubs gear, Smokies gear, autographs from some of the great prospects that the Cubs have in their system right now at the Collector's Corner. Find out for yourself, smokiesbaseball.com/store. And we will talk to you again tomorrow. Go Cubs.